Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Rudowski and Tim Pashot here, joining you on yet another crazy day. Just crazy days are the norm now. Another normal crazy day that's happening right now with a very important update. I, of course, will be talking about all the social, political changes that happened from yesterday. And Tim, of course, will be talking about all the crazy economic news. And there's a lot of crazy economic news, especially with the stock buybacks, with just insane corporate welfare and the selling out of America. Just the simple, basic stuff. But just jumping right into it, recently, Donald Trump tweeted, quote, "The world is at war with a hidden enemy. We will win." Very strong, very bold statement, but I hate to remind everyone that every time the government declares war on something, it usually makes it worse. And it definitely looks like the situation in the United States will get worse from here. I think there's no denying that, especially if you look at the data, and especially if you look at the number of tests that have been done in the United States compared to other countries that have been having a better handle of this virus. There's specific basic pandemic protocol. It hasn't been followed. The situation will get bad, with, of course, many people projecting that it could be just as bad, if not worse, than the situation unfolding in Italy, especially, of course, in major countries in New York City. Especially in major cities in the United States with big populations. Now, in Italy, there are a lot of developments happening that are worrisome, like the fact that the death toll recently was risen from about 300 people to over 2,500 people, with medical professionals warning that the situation will only become more drastic inside of hospitals. But there is a silver lining, as there is some data coming in showing that the infection rate is slowing. Now, hopefully this means a decline in cases, and hopefully this means that the situation will start to pan out in Italy. Hopefully, that's what we could hope for. But yet again, Italy is ahead of us in this, and the best thing we could do is try to prevent what Italy has going on right now. And doesn't look that optimistic, to be just quite honest with you. Iran also just hit its highest number of coronavirus deaths in a day, with, again, the fatalities rising from 147 people to 1,135, with, of course, many new infections and just the severe problem with its medical system that, again, is closed off to the world because of U.S. economic sanctions. The U.S. is waging an economic war on Iran, hurting many average civilians living there. And one part of that war is denying them basic medical stuff that worsened this situation to the extreme extent that it is unfolding right now in Iran. Here, domestically, there is a war of words happening between the New York governor and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. Personally, I don't like both of these politicians, but it definitely does seem like the governor has more of a grip on the situation. He recently accused the mayor, who also was just recently spotted at a gym in New York City, but the governor accused the mayor of spreading panic and fear after the mayor talked about a potential lockdown of New York City to fight this virus, which the governor said most likely wouldn't happen. And if it would, that it would be the governor deciding that. Again, there's another stay-at-home order in San Francisco, but it's very difficult to police, to say the least, as, of course, the cases are spreading and a lot of law enforcement officers are looking out for themselves. And there's a lot of law enforcement officers that are being tested positive for this coronavirus. There's correctional officers in Rikers Island that have been tested positive, which could lay out a disastrous situation for all the prisoners there. There's more than 30 police officers in one police precinct here in New York City that, of course, called out sick. As yesterday, we got the news that 1 tested positive. Today, we're getting the news that 4 have tested positive for the coronavirus, as other officers in this one particular precinct are going home. Again, police officers will be affected by this. And with them being affected, you could definitely make sure that law enforcement will be affected as well. As we have a nice photo of police officers there guarding the toilet paper at one of your local supermarkets. In Philadelphia, the police officers are deciding not to enforce non-violent crimes, specifically crimes when it comes to burglary, vandalism, stolen auto parts, economic crimes, prostitution, retail theft. All of those won't be arrestable offenses for Philly police officers, as of course everyone is feeling the squeeze and the pressure of this situation that is slowly but surely getting out of hand. In New York City, one particular situation that I'm looking at is this news of an alleged cluster happening right now in the ultra-Orthodox community in Brooklyn in Borough Park. Now, this is a community not that far away from me, so this is why obviously I'm keeping an eye on it. But the Orthodox Jewish community in Borough Park, it's when you go there, it's literally like going into a different country. They have their own rules, they have their own laws, they have their own police department. They keep to themselves. They don't mingle or talk to or do any kind of business or work or social activities with anyone else not in their community. But their community is vast, it's huge, and they all practice the same kind of very interesting religious practices that has them congregating very closely to each other. And a lot of the Hasidic Jewish community has not been abiding by a lot of the protocols that has been asked by the government for people to do in order to maintain this virus. And this is why there are many cases and even a suspected major cluster unfolding right now, just a few minutes away from me, which is not really that reassuring. And in major cities where police officers are getting infected with this, with a lot of people not having money to make ends meet, not having a lot of savings, this situation, let's just say, will get very interesting, as it's going to be curious to see who's going to be enforcing these new kind of laws, these new kind of restrictions, as of course they're becoming more and more common, as Donald Trump just also announced the mutual closure of the Canadian-US border to all non-essential traffic moving back and forth. Expect more restrictions, expect more people getting sick, and expect more police officers just kind of looking the other way. In medical news, we're also finding out that people with a particular blood type, specifically type A, may be more vulnerable to the coronavirus. Meanwhile, people with blood type O are more likely to be resistant to it, according to preliminary studies that, again, are just preliminary and are just coming out right now. Again, experts are also coming out now and saying what we've been saying for a very long time, that it's not just old people affected by this, it's also young people that are being devastated by this virus, which is an important antidote that people need to be made aware of. So it's, again, a lot of people are just not taking it seriously, but I've been telling people, please take it seriously so the government doesn't have to intervene. Please take it seriously for the benefit of the doubt of, just you chilling out for a little bit at your house, which is not going to kill you compared to making the situation worse, giving the government more of an excuse to come in and overreach their power and take away more rights away from you. There's other reports coming out of doctors having success fighting this virus with many different medicines. There's also a Chinese doctor coming out saying that he's made a breakthrough with the coronavirus with stem cell injections. There's also talks about vitamin C, AIDS medications, and other medications that have surprisingly been working on some patients. But again, these are all preliminary. This is not medical advice. We're not trying to tell you what to do, but it's best to understood here that there is some kind, it's not all doom and gloom. The human spirit is resilient. There are people making headways against this. There are a lot of people being irresponsible, but ultimately what it all comes down to is you understanding that your individual actions matter here, because we can prevent this crazy, insane situation from getting worse. And it all starts with just having personal responsibility, making the smart and wise decision, and not listening to a butthole boss that's demanding you to work in an industry that's going to fail, in a business that's going to fail, with just the lunacy that's unfolding right now. I mean, I'm talking to some individuals that I personally know, and I can't tell you the level of just idiocy happening, especially with bosses demanding that their workers be subjected to just horrible mistreatment, but also unsafe conditions, just for a little bit of money. That at the end of the day, especially with what's happening in the economic markets, Tim, it looks like it's soon going to be monopoly money, to say the least. Tim, I've talked for a while about the social political aspects economic with the economy.
I'll take over right now. But we have right now. This is breaking news, and I've got this up on screen. Heeding calls for action, Trump invokes Defense Production Act. And so, if we're scrolling down the article here, and this came up as Luke was talking over here, filming this live, but the Defense Production Act was enacted during the Cold War to allow the president to cajole, even coerce industry into producing products deemed necessary for national defense. In this case, the DPA would allow the U.S. government to incentivize a company who already makes emergency medical supplies to make more of them, said Jeff Bialos, a veteran Washington attorney, blah, 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 blah. So anyways, yeah, it looks like now that we're, these are Cold War type efforts that are going on. And why is it going on? So we're looking at the stock market down almost another 2,000 points again today. It was at one point when Luke started the broadcast, but we are down below 20,000. So, those people who had their Dow 20,000 hats or their Dow 30,000 hats, might be a while for the Dow 30,000. But right now we have, do you guys remember when Janet Yellen said we won't see another crisis in our lifetimes? Because it wasn't very long ago. It was, probably about maybe 2 years ago that she said.
Is she still running around kicking?
She's doing, I'm sure she's working for some sort of hedge fund or something right now. But what I've got lined up is actually a crazy statement from Jerome Powell, actually stating that the banks don't need to hold on to any of your money anymore. So let me repeat that. The reserve requirement is gone from 10% to 0%. I really want to thank one of our listeners, Quinn, who yesterday I said I didn't know where the proof of this was. And so he was nice enough to reach out to me, send me the clip, actually timestamp it exactly where it was at. So without any further ado.
Reserve or to the American taxpayer. I won't go into detail on the other actions we took today, but they involved eliminating reserve requirements for banks and encouraging banks to make use of intraday credit with the Federal Reserve and to use their capital and liquidity buffers as they support lending to households and businesses.
Okay, so you heard it right there that Jerome Powell just said that they've reduced it down, the reserve requirement down to zero. Now, what do they have on the screen right now is from federalreserve.gov, and this is saying basically what this article right here is saying in layman's terms, I don't want to bore you guys, is that companies, now the banks can now use stock to pledge that as collateral to get cash. And so what I mean by that is, let's say, you've got Tesla stock that has been cratering, any stock really that's been absolutely cratering. What these banks can do right now is they can take that stock, and let's say that they trade in $1 billion worth of stock. Now they get $1 billion, and that stock goes down in value. Well, then who do you think is ultimately going to be left on the hook for that? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that the taxpayer, us over here, we are going to be the ones who are on the hook for that. And we've got other articles detailing that as well. Fed launches primary dealer credit facility, which will accept stocks as collateral. So this is just sort of a end run around the Fed buying stocks, because they haven't gone out directly and started buying stocks themselves. But this is a way to, effectively buy stocks, because you're taking the stocks as collateral and giving cash. And so if someone's giving you stock and you're giving them cash, I mean, you're effectively buying stocks, but I guess technically not really, but technically you are. So who knows? Now, I did mention to start off that the bond market is a much bigger concern than the stock market, at least, pretty much anyone that's an insider and pays attention to this stuff. And here we have a CNBC Markets article: rates reverse higher rapidly on growing costs to combat crisis. 10-year Treasury yield hits 1.2%. Now, when I was asked a couple years ago, what I thought would be the main thing to kind of kick things off, and that main thing was going to be when the market stopped caring what the Federal Reserve does. And when I say market, the bigger market in this case is actually the bond market, not the stock market. Way more money is tied up in the bond market than the stock market. You've got the other big situation that's occurring here with this is you have basically, you've got the Fed coming out, throwing everything in the kitchen sink, throwing trillions of dollars at the bond market to artificially get these yields lower by buying the bonds themselves. And even though they're doing all this stuff, you're starting to see a big divergence where now the bond yields are going up. Why this is important is, they can control quite a bit of this, but they're going to have to just keep buying more and more and more. These aren't going to just stick to, $2 trillion, bailouts. It's not going to just stick to $1 trillion a night repo markets. This is going way the heck higher in my in my opinion, and it's just insanity. It's just absolute insanity. And over here we do have bailout or bust, Boeing stock battered as bankruptcy odds soar. I know this is something that Luke wanted to touch on, particularly when it comes to stock buybacks. But Luke, I mean, what do you think of the fact that these companies are spend billions and billions of dollars, many times borrowing money that they got from us for free, then they use that to then buy back their own stock. The CEOs got paid millions of dollars because of this whole scheme. Actually, most of the stock buybacks have been, most of the stock buying of the past decade really has come from not from individuals, retail investors, not even from institutions. It's come from the companies themselves. And so here they are wanting another bailout. And what do you make of this, Luke?
I mean, it's a scam. It's an outright scam. We're over 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to continue this conversation on the backup channel, Change the News channel. The link will be down below. And we're just going